Marissa and Ethan Lawson looked like the perfect couple, until his lifeless body was found in their living room, and investigators uncovered a chilling affair with an ex-porn star that would unravel a deadly conspiracy. Ethan and Marissa Lawson were the kind of couple people envied. Living in the quiet, upscale suburb of Danforth Hills, California, they had everything. A sprawling modern home, 2 healthy children, and an image of marital bliss that was both admired and envied by neighbors and social media followers alike. Ethan, in his early 40s, was a rising star in the real estate development world, known for his calm demeanor, business savvy, and tireless work ethic. He was the kind of man who didn't just build homes, he built trust. Clients praised him, employees respected him, and friends relied on his solid, dependable nature. Marissa, in her mid-30s, had once been a fitness instructor at a boutique gym downtown, but after the birth of their second child, she shifted to a new role. Influencer, with her lean figure, flawless complexion, and carefully curated lifestyle posts, she quickly grew a sizable online following. Her brand was built around healthy living, motherhood tips, and wellness inspiration, and she cultivated an image of graceful domesticity. On the surface, Marissa and Ethan were the modern American dream, 2 beautiful people living a beautiful life. They had met 10 years earlier at a charity gala hosted by one of Ethan's clients. Marissa, then a fresh face in the city, was working the event as a part-time model. Ethan had been immediately drawn to her, charmed by her confidence and disarming smile. Their romance moved quickly. Within a year they were married, and soon after they welcomed their first child. The second came 2 years later. The pace of their life accelerated, and with it, so did Ethan's career. He became a partner at his firm, and they upgraded from a modest townhouse to a custom-built home in Danforth Hills, complete with a pool home gym and a chef's kitchen that Marissa loved to show off in her videos. But beneath the polished exterior, the marriage had begun to shift. It wasn't dramatic at first, just subtle changes that only they noticed. Ethan worked long hours, often leaving early in the morning and returning after the kids were asleep. He insisted it was all for them, to build a future, to ensure stability. Marissa never argued with him about it, at least not out loud. But she felt it. The distance, the emotional quiet. She had gone from being his muse to being the woman he texted to ask what was for dinner. Marissa tried to fill the gap. She threw herself into motherhood, into fitness, into content creation. She hosted dinner parties, planned family vacations, smiled for photos. She played her part with poise. But inside, she was beginning to unravel. The excitement was gone. The passion had faded. She started to feel like a background character in her own life. Her marriage, once filled with affection and spontaneous moments, had become a careful performance. There were times when Ethan noticed her detachment. He would bring home flowers or suggest a weekend getaway. But the gestures felt too little, too late. They never addressed the deeper issue, how much they had both changed. Marissa, once fiercely independent, now felt trapped by the very life she had helped build. Ethan, blinded by ambition, failed to see how lonely his wife had become. Their friends saw none of this. To them, Ethan and Marissa were flawless. At community events, they smiled side by side. At school functions, they cheered for their kids together. Online, Marissa posted loving tributes on their anniversary, while Ethan reposted them with brief but affectionate captions. No one suspected that the warmth in those photos had long cooled behind closed doors. Marissa began seeking distractions, first in harmless ways. She started taking more solo trips under the pretense of collaborating with wellness brands. She extended her gym sessions, spent more time on her phone, and became increasingly withdrawn at home. The children were her anchor, but even they couldn't stop her from drifting. She craved attention, validation, something different. Late at night when the house was quiet, she would scroll aimlessly through social media, dipping into private forums and message boards where strangers talked freely, away from the polished filters of Instagram. It was in one of these spaces that she stumbled across a name that would change everything: Vincent Black. He was older, rugged, and had a past she couldn't ignore even if she tried. A former adult film actor turned fitness coach and motivational speaker, he was a man with a complicated past and an intense presence. She found herself intrigued, captivated even. His videos weren't like the typical influencers she followed. They were raw, confident, unapologetically bold. Curiosity turned to fascination. She started watching more of his content, eventually finding him on a smaller platform where he offered private coaching sessions. She booked one, out of curiosity, she told herself. But the truth was, she wanted to feel something again. Anything. That decision, seemingly minor at the time, would mark the beginning of a dangerous unraveling. It would be the spark that set fire to the fragile illusion of her perfect life. In her search for freedom, Marissa would enter a world far darker and more dangerous than she ever imagined. A world where fantasy and obsession would collide, and where the cost of escape would be paid in blood. Marissa's first video call with Vincent Black felt more like a confession than a coaching session. She had expected something superficial, maybe fitness tips or a motivational talk. But the moment he appeared on screen, shirtless, tanned, and completely at ease in his own skin, something inside her shifted. He didn't talk like the polished life coaches she had worked with before. His tone was raw, direct, and seductive. There was no script, no filter, no pretense. And for the first time in a long while, Marissa didn't feel invisible. Vincent had once been famous in a very different kind of spotlight. In the early 2000s, he had made a name for himself in adult films, gaining notoriety for his bold performances and striking appearance. As he aged out of that world, he tried to rebrand himself as a fitness and self-help guru, leaning on his past to market authenticity and confidence. His followers admired him for his honesty, his no shame, no apologies attitude, and his ability to spin his controversial history into empowerment. To Marissa, who was drowning in appearances and social expectations, he was magnetic. After that first call, one session became several. The topics quickly moved beyond fitness. They talked about life, about loneliness, about feeling trapped. Vincent listened without judgment. He gave her attention, something Ethan hadn't done in years. His compliments were bold, his questions deeply personal. She told herself it was harmless, that it was just talk. But the messages became more frequent, more intimate, more dangerous. Soon they were texting throughout the day. Vincent would send her shirtless selfies with cryptic captions. Marissa responded with selfies of her own, carefully posed to seem innocent if anyone ever checked, but loaded with private meaning. They created their own bubble, one where Ethan didn't exist, where responsibility faded and fantasy thrived. Within weeks, their online affair turned physical. Marissa arranged a trip to Las Vegas under the guise of a brand partnership. She told Ethan it was for a weekend retreat with other influencers. He barely asked questions. Vincent was waiting for her at a hotel on the Strip. He met her at the elevator, pulled her inside, and for 2 days they never left the room. It was a whirlwind of lust and recklessness. In Vincent's arms, Marissa felt wild, powerful, and completely detached from the dull routines of her real life. After Vegas, their affair intensified. Marissa began traveling regularly. Los Angeles, Phoenix, even Denver. Sometimes she booked spa weekends. Other times, influencer events that didn't exist. Vincent was always there, waiting. They met in hotels and secluded Airbnbs, sometimes even in cars parked on the edge of town. With every encounter, The boundaries between reality and fantasy blurred. What started as an escape quickly became an addiction. Marissa changed. Her content became edgier, her posts more revealing. Her captions hinted at transformation, at breaking free from societal expectations. She spoke in vague terms about waking up and living your truth. Her followers praised her for her newfound confidence. No one realized the transformation was born not from self-discovery, but from a dangerous entanglement with a man who knew exactly how to manipulate desire. Vincent, meanwhile, grew possessive. He hated that Marissa had to go home, that she had to pretend to be someone else. He called Ethan a coward, a fraud. He spoke about their future together, not in dreams, but in plans. He said he could help raise the kids. He promised they'd move away, start fresh, build a new life without lies. Marissa was flattered, even tempted, but not convinced. She loved the thrill of the affair, but the idea of blowing up her entire life terrified her. She had too much to lose: her home, her image, her children. When she hesitated, Vincent grew impatient. He started pushing harder, sending long emotional messages late at night. He said things like, "We'll never be free until he's out of the way." At first, Marissa ignored these comments. Then she started challenging him, asking what he meant. His replies danced around the subject. He spoke in metaphors, in half-truths. But the meaning was always there, just beneath the surface. One night, while lying in bed beside her sleeping husband, Marissa received a message from Vincent that made her heart pound. It read, "You know this won't end until he's gone. You just have to say the word." She didn't respond. She stared at the screen, then at Ethan, snoring softly, completely unaware of the storm building around him. The next day she deleted the message. But the idea stayed. It clung to her thoughts, whispered during quiet moments. She started imagining what life might look like without Ethan. She told herself she was just fantasizing. But with every secret phone call, every lie, every meeting with Vincent, she moved closer to a line she never imagined crossing. What she didn't realize was that Vincent had already made up his mind. In his eyes, Ethan wasn't a person. He was an obstacle, and obstacles, he believed, were meant to be removed. Marissa never believed it would go that far. At least that's what she told herself. She liked the fantasy, being desired, being seen, but she didn't want to destroy everything she had built. Her children, her reputation, her home, they weren't just props in a curated life. They were real. But the deeper she fell into Vincent's world, the harder it became to separate her thoughts from his. He knew exactly how to pull her in, when to be tender, when to be forceful, when to stir her resentment against Ethan. It was a slow manipulation, and Marissa didn't see it happening until it was too late. They started talking seriously about a future together. Vincent painted vivid pictures of the life they could have. A new city, maybe Arizona or New Mexico, where no one knew them. He'd start a coaching business. She could reinvent her brand, turn their story into a healing journey. He'd say, "People love a survivor. They'll follow you if you tell the truth, the new truth." Marissa would nod along, intrigued but hesitant. The problem was Ethan, always Ethan, still in the picture, still in control. Vincent's tone started to change. He became darker, moodier, especially when Marissa spoke about her children or canceled meetings last minute. He hated being in second place. He began asking pointed questions. "How long are you going to keep living a lie?" Or, "Do you think he deserves any of this?" The pressure escalated. He would call late at night, then again early in the morning. When she didn't answer, he'd leave long, rambling voice messages that swung between passion and fury. Eventually, the conversation shifted toward logistics. Vincent didn't frame it as murder. Not at first. He used words like accident or solution. It always began in hypotheticals. If something happened to him, would you be ready to start over? Or what if fate took care of it for us? At first, Marissa recoiled, but over time her objections softened. She began asking her own questions. How would that even work? Or, what if someone found out? Vincent took that as permission to plan. He told her it wouldn't be messy. No guns, no mess, no drama. Just in and out. A quick, clean break. He'd been around crime in his younger years. He claimed he knew how to make it look like a robbery. All he needed was a window of time. Marissa's next influencer trip was just 2 weeks away. A wellness retreat in San Diego. She'd be out of town for 3 days, a perfect alibi. Vincent said it was meant to be. Vincent said. Marissa hesitated but didn't shut it down. She started to rationalize. Ethan had grown cold. He barely looked at her anymore. He was always busy, always tired. She remembered all the nights she cried alone in the bathroom, all the times he brushed her off with a distracted later. Her resentment festered, turning into something sharper. Vincent fed that resentment every day. They agreed on the weekend of the trip. Marissa would leave on Friday morning. Vincent would drive in Friday night, enter through the side gate, and wait until Ethan was asleep. She'd given him the gate code months earlier, when he claimed he just wanted to feel closer to her. He would make it look like a burglary gone wrong. Ransack a few drawers, break a window, take something small, then disappear. She wouldn't know any details. That way, if anything went wrong, she could say she had no idea. In the days leading up to her departure, Marissa felt a storm of emotions. She snapped at the children, avoided eye contact with Ethan, and barely ate. At night, she lay awake staring at the ceiling, her mind spiraling with what-ifs. What if it didn't work? What if he got caught? What if they traced it back to her? But the worst question, the one she couldn't escape, was what if it worked? Friday arrived. Marissa packed her bags, kissed the kids, and left just after sunrise. Ethan barely looked up from his laptop when she said goodbye. The drive to San Diego was a blur. She checked into the wellness resort, posed for a few photos by the pool, and posted a cheerful caption. Recharging and realigning. Her followers flooded the comments with support. She spent the evening in her suite, phone in hand, staring at the clock. By 11:23 p.m., her phone buzzed. A message from Vincent. It's done. No emoji, no detail. Just those 2 words. Marissa sat frozen on the bed. Her heart pounded so loud she thought the room would shake. She waited for something more, a call, a confirmation, anything. But nothing came. The night stretched on in silence. She barely slept. Every sound outside the hotel made her flinch. When the sun rose, she opened the curtains and looked out at the pool below. Families were already swimming. People were laughing. Life was moving forward as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Back at home, Ethan Lawson was dead, and the carefully staged world Marissa had built was beginning to crack, one silent fracture at a time. The first call to the authorities came just after 8 a.m. on Sunday morning. It was the Lawsons' housekeeper, Marta Ruiz, who had arrived early to prepare the home before the family was scheduled to return. She had worked for the Lawsons for nearly 6 years and had never seen anything out of place. That morning she let herself in through the side door as usual and immediately felt something was wrong. The silence was unnatural. The house, typically filled with the quiet hum of appliances or the shuffle of children's toys, was still, too still. She called out Ethan's name. No answer. She walked further inside and saw the trail. A drawer pulled open. A vase broken on the floor. Then, rounding the corner into the living room, she saw him. Ethan lay face down on the rug, motionless, surrounded by a pool of blood that had already begun to dry. Marta screamed, dropped her cleaning supplies, and ran outside to call 911. Her voice shook as she tried to explain what she had found. When police arrived minutes later, the house was already sealed off with crime scene tape. The initial assumption was a burglary gone wrong, just as Vincent had planned. Drawers in the office had been emptied. Picture frames had been knocked over. A glass cabinet had been shattered. At first glance, it looked like a break-in. But as investigators moved through the scene, details began to raise questions. Nothing of real value had been taken. The television, laptops, and jewelry were untouched. A burglar wouldn't leave behind the most expensive items. There were no signs of forced entry. The doors were locked and windows were intact. Investigators noted the front door had been opened with a code. No damage to the lock, no sign of prying. That led them to believe someone had entered the house with ease. Either the killer had a key, or they knew the access code. Detectives immediately looked at Ethan's background. No enemies, no gambling, no signs of debt, no recent altercations. A well-liked man with no criminal record and no suspicious behavior. The clean-cut image held up under scrutiny. But when they started digging into his marriage, inconsistencies began to emerge. Marissa was reached by phone later that morning. Her voice was shaken, but composed. She told officers she was in San Diego on a wellness retreat, and had no idea anything had happened until she saw missed calls. She returned home that evening, wearing oversized sunglasses and barely speaking. Her grief appeared real to some, but others noticed the lack of detail in her answers, the way she avoided eye contact, the way her hands never trembled. The detectives began tracing activity from the prior 48 hours. They reviewed neighborhood surveillance footage, and what they found only deepened the mystery. At approximately 11 p.m. Friday night, a man wearing a hoodie was seen entering the gated community. Cameras captured him walking along the sidewalk but lost him as he cut through a row of hedges near the Lawson property. There were no cameras facing the back gate, but the timing aligned perfectly with Ethan's estimated time of death, which the coroner placed between 11:30 p.m. and midnight. The footage was grainy, and the man's face was obscured. Still, the timing was too precise to ignore. Police began searching for connections. Who would want Ethan dead, and why? When they examined Marissa's phone records, the investigation took a sharp turn. There were hundreds of messages between her and an unfamiliar number, conversations that stretched back nearly 6 months. The number belonged to Vincent Black. A deeper dive into his background revealed a trail of red flags, a past in the adult entertainment industry, 2 prior arrests for assault, and recent employment as a so-called life coach with no credentials. Police located his address in Las Vegas and placed him under surveillance while they obtained a warrant. Meanwhile, digital forensics began recovering deleted messages and photos from Marissa's devices. What they found was damning. Photos of her with Vincent, intimate, secretive. Voice notes discussing Ethan. And one message, recovered from a cloud backup, that simply read, "It's done." When Vincent was brought in for questioning, he denied everything. Said he hadn't spoken to Marissa in weeks, that they had a fling, but it was over. He claimed to have been home all weekend, but phone tower pings told another story. His phone had traveled from Las Vegas to Danforth Hills late Friday night. He tried to say he had loaned the phone to a friend. The lie unraveled quickly. Faced with mounting evidence, Vincent cracked. In a quiet, emotionless tone, he admitted to being in the house that night. He described the scene in detail only someone present could know. The layout of the home, the location of a broken step, the color of the rug Ethan died on. But then he said something no one expected, that Marissa had planned everything. According to Vincent, it was her idea. She told him where to enter, gave him the code, described Ethan's nightly routine. She had promised him they'd be together afterward. He said she even asked if he'd take the kids once Ethan was gone. Investigators didn't want to believe it, but when they cross-checked his claims with Marissa's deleted voice messages and private texts, the pattern became clear. It wasn't just a lover's jealousy. It was premeditation. The arrest came quietly. Marissa was taken into custody just 3 days after Ethan's funeral. Neighbors watched in stunned silence as officers led her away. The influencer wife, the picture-perfect mother, now a suspect in her husband's brutal murder. What had looked like a tragic home invasion was revealed to be something far more sinister. A cold, calculated plan disguised as an affair. And the illusion of the perfect life crumbled into dust. The trial of Marissa Lawson and Vincent Black captivated the public like few cases ever had. From the moment the charges were announced, the media descended upon Danforth Hills, turning the quiet suburban neighborhood into a circus of camera crews, reporters, and curious onlookers. Headlines painted the case in broad strokes, from perfect wife to femme fatale, influencer turned accomplice, porn star in the plot to kill. Everyone had a theory, and everyone wanted answers. How could a woman who seemed to have everything risk it all for a man with such a troubled past? Prosecutors wasted no time building their case. The digital trail was long and damning. Thousands of text messages between Marissa and Vincent, including ones that discussed Ethan in cold, objectifying terms. Audio messages where Marissa mused about being stuck and desperate to escape. Screenshots of her instructions to Vincent, detailing when Ethan would be home, when he went to bed, and how to avoid security cameras. There were even references to how she would handle public sympathy after Ethan's death. What to post, how to look appropriately devastated, how to frame the story. Forensic analysts also retrieved voice memos from Vincent's phone. One, dated 2 days before the murder, featured Marissa saying, "He'll be alone all weekend, you won't get another chance like this." Another contained Vincent telling her, "After this we start fresh, you and me, no more hiding." These recordings became the centerpiece of the prosecution's narrative, a tale of obsession, betrayal, and manipulation that led to the cold-blooded murder of an innocent man. In court, Vincent tried to portray himself as a victim of Marissa's manipulation. He claimed she used his feelings against him, lured him in with sex and affection, then convinced him that killing Ethan was the only way they could be together. He painted himself as unstable, yes, but easily influenced by a woman who knew exactly what she was doing. He said Marissa never outright demanded Ethan's death, but made it clear that removing the problem was the only way forward. His testimony was erratic and emotional. He cried. He shouted. He begged for understanding. Marissa, on the other hand, appeared calm and composed throughout most of the proceedings. Her lawyers argued that she had been manipulated, not the other way around. They claimed Vincent had become obsessed with her, stalked her, and took matters into his own hands when she tried to end the affair. They suggested that the messages were taken out of context, that the audio clips were edited, and that Marissa never asked Vincent to harm anyone. They insisted she was a grieving widow who had been deceived and betrayed. But the evidence spoke louder than the defense. The timeline, the travel records, the access code, the deleted messages, all of it pointed to a coordinated plan. And when the prosecution played a final video, recovered from Vincent's cloud storage, the courtroom fell silent. In it, Marissa sat on a hotel bed, casually drinking wine, and smiling as she whispered, "After this weekend, I'm free." It was recorded the night before Ethan was murdered. The jury deliberated for less than 2 days. Vincent Black was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Marissa Lawson was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and second-degree murder. She was sentenced to 35 years to life. Neither showed emotion as the verdicts were read. Marissa stood quietly, her hands folded in front of her, her face expressionless as the judge listed the charges. Vincent stared at the floor, lips tight, as if he had already accepted his fate. The children were placed in the custody of Ethan's sister, a quiet woman who had avoided media attention throughout the trial. She moved them out of Danforth Hills and declined all interview requests. In a short written statement, she said only that the children were safe, healing, and would be protected from the noise of the outside world. In the months that followed, the public fascination with the case only grew. Documentaries were made, podcasts dissected every detail. Online forums debated Marissa's motives, with some arguing she had been driven mad by emotional neglect, and others branding her as a cold-hearted sociopath who orchestrated her husband's death for lust and freedom. Photos of her smiling at luxury resorts and posing beside Vincent in dimly lit hotel rooms became symbols of a double life that fooled everyone, even those closest to her. 1 year after the trial, Ethan's grave received a new headstone. It read simply, "Ethan Lawson, beloved father, taken too soon." No mention of husband, no mention of the horror that ended his life. Just a quiet tribute to the man who had trusted the wrong person, loved the wrong woman, and never saw the end coming. The story of Marissa and Vincent remains a chilling reminder that appearances can deceive, and that the most dangerous lies are often told not with words, but with smiles, secrets, and silence. In the end, what started as a fantasy spun in secrecy ended in blood, betrayal, and irreversible tragedy. Ethan Lawson didn't just lose his life. He lost it at the hands of the person he trusted the most. And no filter, no hashtag, and no carefully curated post could ever cover that truth.